In this lesson, we're going to add and subtract rational expressions. So here we go. So what you need to notice is that this is a fraction and you are adding it to another fraction. If you are adding or subtracting fractions, you need to get a lowest common denominator. You don't need to do it if you're multiplying or dividing, but when you add and subtract, you do need a common denominator. So the common denominator is actually going to be these two combined. Okay, so the lowest common denominator is going to be 3m plus 5 multiplied with 6. So what that means is that you are going to have to you're going to have to turn this denominator into this. And you would do that by multiplying this by 6, but what you do to the bottom, you have to do to the top. Now to turn this one into that, you're going to have to multiply the top by 3m plus 5, and what you do to the bottom, you have to do to the top. So what we then have is, at the top, you're going to have 6m plus 1 plus 4m, 3m plus 5, and then we're going to put that together, and then the bottom will just have the denominator like that. So now we need to go simplify. So we're going to multiply the brackets out. So that's going to become 6m plus 6 plus 12m squared plus 20m. And then at the bottom, you're just going to be left with, don't multiply the bottom out, just leave it as it is. There we go. Now at the top, you're just going to simplify. So that'll become 12m squared plus 26m plus 6, and then at the bottom you'll just be left with that. Now at the top we can take out a common factor from those three numbers, and that common factor would be a 2. So you could take out a 2 and you'd be left with 6m squared, add 13m, add 3, and then at the bottom you'd be left with 6, 3m, add 5. Now what you should realize is that if you had to type this on your calculator, those two would become 1 over 3, so this would become a 1, and this would become a 3. So because there's a 1 there, I'm just going to ignore that. And then you might be tempted to try factorize this. There's nothing wrong with that, but you would find that that one cannot factorize. And so this would sort of be the final, well, not sort of, it would be the final answer. So we typically don't multiply the denominator out. We usually leave that in the factorized form, but we do usually multiply the top out. Okay, let's do another example. So here's our next example. So we need to get a common denominator. So the common denominator would actually just be the two brackets together, like that over there. And so what that means is we are going to we would have to turn this denominator into that, you would have to multiply it by p plus 3. So you're going to multiply p plus 3. But what you do to the bottom, you always have to do to the top. And then to turn this into p plus 6, p plus 3, you would have to multiply this by p plus 6. And what you do to the bottom, you have to do to the top. Okay, so now what happens is that we can just write the denominator at the bottom, p plus 3, p plus 6. And then we're just going to fill everything in. So p plus 3 multiplied by 2p, take away 6p, multiplied by p plus 6. So what we'll do now is we won't multiply the bottom denominator together. We'll just leave it in the bracket form, but we will multiply all of this out. Okay, and so that's going to become 2p squared, add 6p, take away 6p squared, take away 36p. See what I did there? I just multiplied that in. And then at the bottom, we're just going to leave that as it is. Okay, now at the top, we're just going to simplify. So 2 take away 6 would give us negative 4p squared. You see those two. And then 6 take away 36 is going to be negative 30p. And then at the bottom, we just leave it as it is. Now at the top, we could take out a common factor. The number 2 can go into both of those. So I'm going to take out a negative 2. And you could take out a p, actually. I just realized that. So you would be left with positive 2p squared. No, positive 2p, sorry. And then add 15. And then at the bottom, you're just left with p plus 3 and p add 6. But now, the reason I took out a common factor was because I was wanting to see if this common factor would cancel with anything at the bottom. But because nothing has cancelled, I'm actually going to multiply the negative 2p back into the bracket again, because we never want to leave the top part in the factorized form. Here's our next example. Now, I haven't needed to mention this before, up till now in this lesson, but when you have these denominators, you need to make sure that they can be factorized. Well, you need to factorize them first. So in this example that we did earlier, we could not factorize, and the same is true for the first example that we did. But in this example, we can factorize this as a trinomial, and we can take out a common factor here. So that's the first step. So this is a trinomial, so that would end up becoming x take away 2, x take away 1. You may need to pause and just make sure that you agree with me on that. And then for this part over here, you take out a common factor of 2, and you'd be left with x take away 2. The reason we've done that now is to realize that they both have this. Okay, so in your lowest common denominator, you're going to take everything that we can see. So we can see there's a 2, we can see there's a x take away 2, and we can see that there's a x take away 1. So that is your lowest common denominator. So if you look at this, you need to try turn that into this. So what is missing? Well, the only thing that is missing is the 2. So that means you're going to multiply a 2 at the bottom, but what you do to the bottom, you have to do to the top. And then if you look at this part, the only thing that's missing is the x minus 1. So we're going to multiply x minus 1 at the bottom, and then what you do to the bottom, you do to the top. And so what we now have is we're just going to go write out the common denominator at the bottom, and then we're just going to put the top part. Okay, now we're just going to go simplify the top part as much as possible by multiplying out the brackets, like that. And then at the bottom, we don't multiply out the brackets, we just leave it like that. And so if we had to go simplify the top a little bit further, we would end up with 13x take away 5, and then at the bottom you'd be left with that. And nothing can be factorized here, nothing can be cancelled, so that's the final answer. Alright, so what you want to do, make sure your denominators are factorized first. So that's going to be 4, and then this was a difference of squares, so it's going to be x take away 4 and x add 4. Okay, this is a normal trinomial, so let's quickly just go say plus 3. Now that would factorize as x plus 4 and x plus 4. So you would have to say x plus 4 to the power of 2. So if you look at your lowest common denominator now, this is important. There's a x plus 4 to the power of 2. So you don't have to take this one because that's already built into that one. It's quite weird how that works. And then there's a x minus 4. Because what we need to do is we need to try turn both of these into the common denominator. So if you look at what's missing here, this one is simply missing another x plus 4, right? Because it only has one x plus 4, but the common denominator has 2. So what we'll do is we'll multiply the bottom here by x plus 4, but what you do to the bottom, you have to do to the top. Now, if you look at this one in the common denominator, all that one is missing is x take away 4. So we multiply the top with x take away 4, and we do the same over here. Okay, so now we're going to go put everything over the common denominator, which is like that. And so now we're just going to go put this together, so 4x add 4, plus 3, and then x take away 4. And so what we're going to end up with now is 4x add 16, add 3x, take away 12, and then at the bottom we just have x take away 4, and then x add 4 squared. Now we're just going to go simplify this, so we're going to put the 4x and the 3x together, which would be 7x, and then the 16 and the 12 is just 4, and then there's nothing else we can really do, so the bottom will just stay like that. Here's our last example. So always make sure that you factorize the bottoms as much as possible. So this one can factorize into x take away 3 and then x add 3. So if you look at your lowest common denominator, it would literally just be x take away 3 and x add 3. And so that means that this one still needs x add 3, but what you do to the bottom, you must do to the top. This one still needs x take away 3. What you do to the bottom, you must do to the top. And then this one doesn't need anything. And so now we can just go put the common denominator as x take away 3, and then x add 3. And then let's just go for what we have in so long. Okay, so now we're just going to go simplify by multiplying the brackets in. So that's going to become 2x squared, add 6x, take away 2x squared, add 6x over there, and then add 36. At the bottom, we just leave it as it is. Alright, now we're just going to take the top part, and we're going to simplify it as much as possible. So this 2x squared and this 2x squared are going to cancel out because the one's a plus and the one's a minus. And so we're going to be left with 12x add 36. And then at the bottom, x minus 3, x add 3. So now at the top, what we can do is we could take out a common factor of 12, and you'd be left with x add 3. And then at the bottom, you still have this and this. And so what happens now is that these x add 3's cancel. And so we're left with a final answer of 12 over x take away 3.